Good afternoon. I'm glad you all could make it here today. This is a wonderful turnout. When Nick mentioned that they were looking for somebody to introduce our speaker, I just jumped on it because I've been showing his movies in his documentary in my classes at Mid-State for the last 2 or 3 years. And they never fail to invoke so much discussion and so much, knowledge seeking with the students. And I'm just honored, and I can't wait for him to talk. And so I'm going to just, turn it over to Josh. He's got a new documentary coming out called Gasland II. Mid-July or so it's coming out, and I just can't wait. And he's just been a great advocate and person that's been working towards knowledge and opening up the knowledge of this industry. And I can't tell you how pleased I am to introduce him. So let's give a big hand to Josh Fox.
Can you hear me? So, I've been touring all across America with Gasland 2. It's our grassroots tour. We wanted to give the film to the grassroots before it went on HBO and went into 40 million American homes. I've toured to 250 different cities with the first film, and we managed to go to New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Colorado, California, and Illinois with the new one so far, but we'll get around. And something special happened. Someone called me up and said, Pete Seeger is playing on behalf of these activists who sat in trees and tried to stop a gas pipeline in Milford, PA. Do you want to come and introduce him? I said, well, the first concert I saw was Pete Seeger, the second concert I saw was Pete Seeger, the third concert I saw was Pete Seeger, fourth and fifth concerts I saw was Pete Seeger, the sixth concert I saw was Kiss. So yeah, I would like to go. And I had some time with him backstage. He's 94 years old. And I really modeled what the film Gasland was on what he had done. He had connected upstate New York with downstate New York. He said if you pollute upstate New York, you're going to have this in the city. And he managed to get all these people's attention and started the Clearwater and started to work on the Hudson River. And in the Delaware River Basin in Pennsylvania and in New York, the border, we had the same issues. So when I was confronted with the gas industry at my doorstep, the first friend that I had was Pete Seeger. And that history. And so I don't know, you might have seen the film or seen the cover of the DVD box with me on the front with the banjo. And it was risk, I think. But it paid off. And I told Pete, all right, I want to play one thing before I introduce you, if that's okay. And I told him what I was playing, and he goes, oh, that was the biggest hit song of 1814. And he says, that song started in a bar. It was an old tune, it was an old drinking tune, everyone knew the tune, but someone came out with a new lyric. And they sang it in the bar, and it was so popular, he had to sing it twice. And then he said, clip, clop, at 4 miles an hour on the back of a horse and buggy, the lyrics of that tune went all over the United States. And it slowly became something even more popular and important. So I'm going to play it now and see if you can't figure it out. You understand the temptation now to not talk at all and just play the banjo for the rest of the day. But, you know, I learned a lot of lessons from afar from Pete Seeger. And I got to learn one up close that day, which is that if you go into a bar and sing at the top of your lungs, and if the national anthem of the United States of America could be a bar song that just somehow travels on horseback, then you're really kind of just making up America as you go along the whole way. Yeah. What's that? Aren't you? Yeah. That right. And that's when a place like this was just somebody's idea one day. And this moment requires, I mean, here's Pete Seeger, 94 years old. I think of him as one of the great authors of America, authoring a whole chunk of our history and our thinking and our ways of being. And I believe right now that the movement against fossil fuel development, whether that's fracking, that's going on in 34 states, or mountaintop removal, where they're literally blowing up mountains all over Appalachia, or protesting deep water drilling that has wrecked the Gulf of Mexico for generations, or tar sands in the Keystone Pipeline. That is a moment of authorship of the United States that's happening. And that you never really know what's going to happen when you start singing in a bar or any other venue. That this is a moment where we're really required to author the next chapter of American history, because if we don't, we're going to lose everything that we have. And just a week and a half ago, something that has never happened before, as far as I know, happened in New York State. They did something called a crossroads rally. Did you hear about this? It was the largest anti-fracking rally in the history of New York State, and that's a lot. But it was a crossroads rally, and on the poster on one side they had fracking and all of the horrible things that are associated with it in this wonderful graphic. And on the other side they had renewable energy and windmills and solar farms and this beautiful blue sky and bright new day and happy children and dogs playing with each other. And it was a huge success because people are starting to understand that it's not just about, okay, we have to ban fracking. It's about this transition over to a whole new form of energy. And obviously this is the point of today and this whole weekend. But it seemed a very, very far away thought when at first the fossil fuel industry came to my door and said, well, we want to drill all over the upper Delaware River Basin, will you lease your land? And I started to look into it and found out that they were exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act, that they were injecting millions of gallons of water laced with silica, sand, and chemicals into the ground, that people had such severe water contamination that all across the country they could light their water on fire. And the whole journey of the first film, Gasland, which took me all across the United States of America, from New York to Pennsylvania, to Arkansas, to Colorado, to Wyoming, to New Mexico, to Texas, to Louisiana, and found the same story everywhere I went. Water contamination, air pollution, health problems, a crisis where people's towns had been completely overthrown by, in some cases, foreign multinational corporations, or so-called United States corporations that were backed by Statoil of Norway or Chinese interests. And that the basic fabric of life had been totally overthrown. And people are starting to add it up, that it's not just a question of we have to get this out of our backyard, but now we woke up one morning and realized that we have to completely change the world. And that's the job. The job isn't, that's it. It's a daunting thought. When you first are faced with the industry, you say, oh, well, we just make everybody aware of the chemicals. And then we'll just make everybody aware of these emissions and the health problems and how destructive this is. And then you realize, well, you're campaigning for a ban on a certain form of energy. You're advocating for turning off the lights in the middle of the hospital, in the middle of an operation, unless you're replacing the energy. And then that thought slowly starts to come around. We are in a moment where we literally have to rewrite the way we do everything. And that is a daunting task, but it is also what is called for right now. So what I learned, the other thing I learned from Pete that day, 10 days ago, 12 days ago, was that it's also the power of the story that you tell. And that he was going to take his time telling me the story of the national anthem, which I had never heard before. Have you heard it before? I mean, that was a moment that made me appreciate that in a completely different way and changed the game of playing that forever. And it's the credit music for Gasland 2. Now, that version that you just heard. And it's that power of being able to tell the story. I think often in activism, we are always getting to the point. You know what I mean? And we're saying these things that are in issue brackets. And it's like a rush. I've got to explain to you why this is so important. But I know why the film worked. The film worked because people told their stories. And I was standing at another rally in New York State, and I was, lifted up by a rising tide. Had submitted 204,000 public comments on an environmental impact study. It had never happened before. The previous record for a pre-fracking issue on an environmental impact study is kind of a boring type of regulatory, it's 2,000 pages long. It was written by regulators and the gas industry together, and you have to kind of comb through it and figure out how to comment on it. 204,000 New Yorkers did this. That's more people than voted for our governor, Andrew Cuomo, in his home borough of Queens. It's more people than voted for the governor of New York in the entire southern tier counties of New York State. So there was this wave of commenting and democratic participation. And I stood there in what's called the $1 Million Staircase. It's this beautiful and ornate staircase in Albany. And I said, Governor Cuomo, how did this happen? How does this happen to people? And I said, I was in Arkansas. And I was with a woman who, I was in a place where they had 1,000 earthquakes in a year due to injection wells from natural gas drilling. They inject the waste from the natural gas drilling, these incredible toxic liquid that is all the fracking chemicals and the volatile organic compounds, and in a lot of cases it's radioactive because the formation is reactive. And what do? They just inject it back into the ground somewhere away from where the drilling is and hope it stays down there. So what they were doing was lubricating the tectonic plates. And they had 1,000 earthquakes. And most of them were microquakes, small quakes. People could feel them once a day, little vibrations. It popularized iPhone's earthquake app with high schoolers. It was all the rage. Everywhere else in the country, they were playing Angry Birds. In Guy, Arkansas, they were like, oh, there was another earthquake, see? On my iPhone. And this woman in her house in Arkansas, she raised dogs. She had like 100 of these tiny little black snowflake dogs, prize-winning dogs, and they were running all over the yard, screaming all the time. I don't know how she got anything done ever. But she had a plumb bob on the bottom of her coffee table, because someone in Ireland had said, this is how you can measure an earthquake. You get a plumb bob, put it on the bottom of your coffee table, and see when it moves. So it was hung off the bottom of the coffee table. You had to kind of crawl underneath the coffee table to see it, and she would look at it, and every time it moved a little bit, she would go onto the earthquake registry site and see there was another quake. She had a video camera trained on this plumb bob moving slightly. So most of the time, these microquakes were not such a big deal. But a 4.7 came through and knocked her husband off of his lazy boy chair. And he's a big man, she said. And I can imagine that when he hit the floor, something happened to him. And I tell the story of Amy Ellsworth in Colorado, who you saw in the first Gasland, hopefully, who could light her water on fire. And she discovered this, and the first word that she used was terror. Total terror. She had 5 or 6 gas wells in her backyard. Off of her front porch, you can see the Rocky Mountains, part of a subdivision right outside of Denver. And she was showering in the dark because she was afraid that a light bulb from a spark from her light bulb in a bathroom would blow up her bathroom while she was in the shower. And I imagine that when she's standing there naked in the dark, dripping, fumbling for the towel, something happened to her. Or the story of the G family. 5 generations on the same land in Tioga County, Pennsylvania. Shell built a 6-well horizontal pad right off of 150 feet off of their bedroom window. And their water became flammable, and contaminants were running off of the site into their pond and killing their pond and killing the ecosystem in their pond. And Jeremiah G. would pull dead salamanders out of the pond every day. And a 3-legged dog named Ada, who would look at the drilling rigs and then go and dig with one leg. And Jeremiah take pictures of her up against the rig saying, oh, I can drill a well. I can drill in the ground too. And his chickens were drinking bottled water. Probably, he says, the only chickens in Tioga County, Pennsylvania drinking bottled water. Well, not really true. There were probably a lot of people and animals drinking bottled water in that part of Pennsylvania. They had to settle with Shell, enter into a non-disclosure agreement, so they can't tell their story anymore. Luckily, it's in Gasland 2. But I can imagine that walking away from their property after being there for 5 generations and locking the door for the last time and leaving to go somewhere else, something happened to them. Each one of these stories is a data point on a chart somewhere, sitting in front of President Obama. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And I think when we go out there and talk about why our communities are important and why this matters, I think it is important to not leave the details out, because they matter a lot. So as we go out and do the job of writing the next phase of American history, I think the question is, how are we going to tell that story? And it's up to every last one of us to be able to do that. So, one story I want to tell you from my experience. When Governor Cuomo decided that the moratorium on fracking, the formal moratorium, the executive order, would not be continued, I called up a friend of mine, Mark Ruffalo, the green superhero, the Incredible Hulk. He's a green superhero for other reasons, and I said, we've got to find the best renewable energy plan for the state of New York. We've got to find this best plan, and we've got to start advocating for this right now. We've got to find some kind of a substitute. And there was none. We looked for research, we couldn't find one. So we went out to California and visited solar farms and visited wind farms and visited anaerobic biodigesters and met with a guy named Mark Jacobson who works at Stanford. And he had written a front page article in Scientific American, how to get America and the world 100% off of fossil fuels and towards renewables. And he figured this weird, funny thing out, which is that when the wind is not blowing, the sun is often shining. Right, right. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out, but you know, we talk about intermittency and how it's a big problem in renewable energy, all their intermittency problem. Well, as it turns out, he mapped out all these arcs of when the sun is shining and when the wind is blowing. And if you bundle wind and sun, you get to 95% of all your generation that you need. Consistent power generation. And he is using hydroelectric to fill in the gaps. He's using, and so we said, can you please write a plan for the state of New York? And he said, sure. And we hooked him up with two guys from Cornell, Tony Ingraffia and Bob Howarth, who demonstrated, because of leakage rates of methane into the atmosphere, that natural gas is on a par or worse than coal to develop with respect to climate change. The natural gas industry is kind of like the witches from Macbeth. You know, they tell you half of a sentence and leave the rest out. Which is from Macbeth. You've probably read the play, the Shakespeare play Macbeth. They go to him and they say, you're going to be the king. And he's like, awesome. And they leave out the part about how he has to kill all of his friends, his wife's going to go crazy and commit suicide, and he's going to be dead in 3 days. They left that part out. It's called equivocation. There was a word for it. And when the natural gas industry comes in and they say, oh, well, we burn 50% cleaner than coal. It sounds great. It should be a transition fuel. Bridge fuel. We'll do that to cut down our CO2 emissions. Well, they leave out the fact that methane is up to 105 times more potent at warming the planet, global warming potential, in the 20-year time frame than CO2 is. So you need 1 pound of methane in the atmosphere warms the atmosphere as much as 100 pounds of carbon dioxide in the 20-year time frame. 105 times. EPA currently measures methane as 21 times higher than CO2 because they're looking at the 100-year time frame. Doesn't make any sense. We know that at current rates of warming, we'll get to 2 degrees when things get really bad by 2042. That's not 100 years from now. So Tony Ingraffia and Bob Howard spelled this out and showed that in the short term, developing natural gas as a bridge fuel is about the worst thing that we can do. We need to not ask the question, how do we replace coal, but ask the question, how do we replace fossil fuels altogether, which is the question that you're asking here. So we said to Mark Jacobson, can you write this plan? And he wrote the plan. These guys sort of fell in science love with each other, and the emails went flying back and forth. And they're on like version number 75 of the plan, and now it's peer-reviewed. And yeah, peer-reviewed means it's real.
Right.
So in going around, and this story, some of this story is told in Gasland too, not the part that I'm telling you now, but the Jacobson plan and the story about global warming. And now going around the United States, 23 cities in 30 days or something, we saw huge, huge crowds of people turn out for Gasland 2. Unbelievable. Californians Against Fracking was launched. 100 organizations signed on in the first 6 months. We had 1,700 people come to see a movie in Pittsburgh 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And so what Mark Jacobson and Mark Ruffalo and I have done is create something called the Solutions Project. The Solutions Project is to take the fracking movement, this vast army of those data points that I told you about, and get them motivated to take the solutions that you have here and implement those things in the world. And so this is an incredible opportunity right now to do crossroads on the other side. Because what I want to tell you is, and this is the story also of the new film, our democracy is being taken away from us by oil and gas. They have taken over at the state level, the local level, and the federal level. That is the story of the new film. It's not how do you light your water, oil and gas makes you light your water on fire. This is oil and gas lighting our democracy on fire. This is oil and gas injecting toxic material into our democracy. Every dollar that they contribute, and they contributed $747 million to get their exemption to the Safe Drinking Water Act. $747 million in lobbying expenditures, and $1.5 million, or 150 million, sorry, in the 2012 election. That's $1 billion. Very hard to compete in those terms. But every one of those dollars is a contaminant in the political system. Every one of them is like one of those chemicals that are in the ground. Luckily, you can extract them easier than you can get the chemicals out of the aquifer. You can't do that. You have that stuck in there for a long time. Probably forever. But what I want to say to you is, when we're talking about developing renewable energy, I want to urge you to do two things and think about this deeply. And know that this is happening out there. Because one of the things that happened when we put that Jacobson plan out there is immediately some people in upstate New York started protesting the idea of onshore wind. Which is, they're right. And what I want to say is, we're here as the Solutions Project to say to communities, these are your options. We don't have any stake in any of them. You have to figure this out democratically. Because the fracking movement is a rebirth of democracy when democracy has been taken away. Democracy is being taken away at the state, local, and federal level. We've seen that happen. We've watched the science get destroyed. We've watched our representatives turn and walk away. We've watched how difficult it is to intersect with a system that's that bathed in toxic dollars. But what's happening in the fracking movement is people are reinventing the idea of democracy. They're reinvesting in their own civil and human rights and banning fracking at the local level and seeking to ban fracking at the state level. And they're reinventing all these new forms of how we organize together. And when we're talking about developing renewable energy, it has to be put in that democratic parameter. Because I'll venture to say that the strongest thing to fight climate change and the strongest thing to fight all of these things that we're facing is not solar or wind. It's a strong community that believes in itself and is talking to itself and communicating with itself, even if we make the wrong decisions at first or at second. To be honest, I watched as Hurricane Sandy emptied the Atlantic Ocean into the New York City subway. I watched as the New York City police force, one of the most expansive and well-managed and armed and whatever else you want to call it, police forces in the world, could not maintain order in the Far Rockaways after Sandy. After dark, that place was ruled by something else. And I watched the New Yorkers in Occupy Sandy outperform FEMA and outperform the city of New York and outperform the state of New York. Because thousands and thousands of New Yorkers streamed into the doors of churches and they organized rides and they donated stuff and they donated their extra time and they just went out there and started to repair the community. And they were attacked by their own government. But I watched how that sprang up and made a short film about it, Occupy Sandy. You can see it online. It's free if you want to watch it. And I watched how the strength and resiliency of that made a new and better day every day that they were working on that. And now, I'm sure those communities will come to understand how offshore wind and this is another Jacobson paper that I'll give you a sneak preview of, it's not released yet, offshore wind actually breaks apart hurricane winds and tames them if you put enough of them out there, and it creates a wind wall against some of the most harsh effects of something like Sandy. Amazing. They can do these calculations now. I'm sure that community will come to that conclusion if they're approached in a way that says, we have to do this together. You benefit, you weigh the costs, you weigh the benefits, you do it yourself. And that it doesn't come from some fairy godmother scientist like Mark Jacobson, but it comes from this act of neighbor talking to neighbor, people talking to people, investing day to day in the communities. Because that's how the fracking movement got born, that's how the national anthem traveled, and that's how we can reauthor this. So when we think about this going forward, my recommendation, my hope, because it's the most inspiring thing that we can do, is to knock on doors, neighbor talking to neighbor, get into the community, and the best way in some of those places you can do is to interact with the movement that's fighting against extreme energy, whether it's mountaintop removal or tar sands or fracking, because those are the people who are going to be your early adopters, those are the people who are going to be your champions, those are the people who are going to know the back roads that you have to take as you go ahead and do that. But it's got to be about democracy. It can't be about some other solution based on numbers. It's got to be about us telling this story. That's what I believe. And I know that it's the most inspiring and amazing thing that we can do because it changes the world every day. I know our ambition is to change the world in much bigger terms, but it changes the world every day when you interact and intersect with your community. And the other thing I would humbly request, as I ask the fracking movement to work really hard on learning about renewable energy and adopting renewable energy and embracing these technologies and embracing these common sense and community-based solutions, I have to ask you, if you are the renewable energy movement or the providers or the producers, fight the oil and gas industry. Fight them hard. We need that. We need all the help we can get. They're the biggest industries on the face of the earth. They have more money than any corporations in the history of money, as Bill McKibben likes to say. It's got to be crossroads on the other side too. So we need your positive energy. Maybe you need a little of our negative energy. Because, you know, what we're doing is not just authoring the next phase of America, we have to defend what's here now. And those people, whether they're packing up their house or standing naked in the dark or falling off of their lazy boys, they need people who are going to come and rush in the door and explain, or the commuters on the subway wading through the salt water that should be at Jones Beach. They need people who are going to come in and say, this is not just a local fight. Because there's no frack drilling in Wisconsin. But I was just about to get to it. But they're doing mountaintop removal in Wisconsin. They're blowing up frack sand, and it's not just sand, it's silica. Silica gets into your lungs and gives you silicosis, a form of lung cancer, and it's blowing all over the place. And the gas industry will tell you, oh, it's just like your kid's sandbox, go and play in it. Because as the people of Appalachia know, or the people of southwestern Pennsylvania know, there's always been a group of people who have been expendable in the face of fossil fuel production. Just write them off. How did our coal get in underneath their mountains? Type of thing. And the arena of those people who are being rendered and considered expendable, the MO of the fossil fuel industry is just widening and widening and widening and widening until you can't get anywhere where no one is affected and threatened by this. So our fight is your fight. And I just want you to know, though, if I can transmit any of the enthusiasm of the amazing last month, there is an army out there who are going forward to adopt these technologies and transform their communities and make these difficult decisions about how much wind, how much sun, how much of this, how much of the other thing. And as we go ahead with solutions, we're going to try to figure out how to track those experiments, those transition towns, those places, and see it as a democratic experiment rather than a scientific one. As something where we are telling a new story and we're creating a new story of the place where we want to live, where I want to live. So, thank you very much. And I would like to take questions. Thank you so much. I also wanted to let you know we have a wonderful guest, Doug Shields, the president of the city council, who fought and got the ban, the first ban on fracking in the history of the world passed for the entire city of Pittsburgh. Jumped in the car with me today and decided to come over. So he's here, and he can also talk, if we have any time, about civil and environmental rights. There he is, Mr. Doug Shields. Thank you, Doug. So, we don't have a lot of time left, right? We have some, yes?
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, so let's do some questions quickly.
One
and then two.
Oh, sure. My question was regarding, because you're talking about how they're injecting toxic material into our democracy, and I wondered your opinion on a movement to take down the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is, trying to deregulate the fossil fuel industry and enable fracking and do offshore oil drilling and all that. I mean, how important do you see the fight against corporate lobbyists like the U.S. Chamber?
I think it's the hallmark of our era, of our age, that we are seeing corporate domination at every level of government. And that's why why make a sequel, to this film, is to try to address this issue. And I think that's a hugely important fight. And I think the Citizens United fight is a hugely important fight. You guys know about Citizens United. Boom. It was like a cow back there. It was like, meow, Citizens United. I know about that. No, but I agree with you. And I think that, look, we all have to intersect with wherever your passion is. If your passion is to go in that direction, you have to do it, because there are going to be a lot of other passionate people who are doing that. I'm just suggesting a method. I hired as our grassroots organizer a person who was working for President Obama in 2012. President Obama is getting an F on these issues in a big way right now. It's incredibly disheartening. It's incredibly distressing. I am so upset with this, and I want to win him back. He's our president. The grassroots elected him. Let's get him back. He's currently not doing well on these issues, in my opinion, and you'll see a little bit about that when you watch the new film. But he said, in the face of all this corporate money, the thing that wins is neighbor talking to neighbor. And I'd like to take that message right back at him. And I think the Chamber of Commerce fight is simply a veiled, it's like, Chamber of Commerce sounds like really fancy. It sounds sort of like a country club. And it's really the 1% just defending their interests and doing lots of things that interfere with democracy and interfere with our rights. This man was next.
So I really like your idea about telling the whole story, but you know how sound bites are.
Yeah.
What kind of pithy ideas do you have for connecting this sand with the tragedy of fracking? Because in my state, we're selling sand, baby, and it's a big bucks operation. I think we're making money.
Right.
And to get past that, I'm trying to connect the dots here. I need some.
Well, where are you from?
Opposite end of the state, up by the Lake Superior watershed.
What's your favorite part? Where do you come from? What's at stake?
In the place where the sand is, the driftless area is at stake.
What does that mean? What's the driftless area? Is that where Woody Guthrie came from?
Um,
That's the drifting area, driftful area.
it's just hard to connect the dots, because it's obvious to me that to export something that becomes the source of fracking is immoral. And to give up our sand to do that is stupid. But people aren't listening to that.
You know, I saw a picture of a street in Illinois where there was frac sand mining going on, and in one side of the street was this sort of residential community, and the other side of the street was the frac sand mine, and every single house had a for sale sign in front of it. Everybody was trying to get out of there. Sometimes it's the imagery. When I met Robert Neiman, this wonderful frac sand activist from Iowa, who's phenomenal, he drove all the way to Telluride to see Gasland II, and we ended up hanging out with him for the next 3 days. Amazing guy. I think that he was talking about how, and this is true, oil and gas industry told people that this was just sand that kids could play in. It's not sand, it's silica, it gives you cancer. It's not really pithy, but I think the image of kids playing in a sandbox that they think is sand, and it's actually this cancer-causing agent, and that's exactly what's happening. To me, that's one way to look at it, but I think you got to find the image or the story that will reach out to people past the platitude, I think a little bit, but you know, that's on the big frame. The little frame is when you're trying to get this across to other people outside of it, how do we connect, you know, what's happening in where the places where the frac sand mining is, and people who are outside of that arena. And I think it's trial and error. I think you just have to keep talking as much as you can. There's this film called Frac Sand Land that Robert Neiman made. He handed me a copy. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe you want to look that up. I think it's online.
Thank you.
Over there. In the stripy shirt.
Hi, I was wondering if you might have information about any moratoriums about drilling in the Great Lakes. There are natural gas resources in the Great Lakes, and I really haven't heard a lot of information about moratorium to prevent that from occurring.
You know, the Utica Shale runs underneath some of the Great Lakes, and there is the talk of drilling into the Great Lakes. Everything's for sale. Everything's up for grabs. They're drilling very close to the Grand Teton National Forest. They wanted the Delaware River Basin, the watershed for 16 million people. If it stretches your credulity that they could even actually go there, they're going there. That's the way they operate. And now they're not advertising the shales anymore. I heard oil and gas people lamenting the fact that the big play throughout California, which is in the Central Valley, which is right near a place where 80% of the lettuce in America is produced, right? So it's like everyone who eats salad versus ExxonMobil. And it's on top of the San Andreas Fault. If you've seen Superman 2, it's like, you know, Lex Luthor is like, I'm gonna drill here, I'm gonna knock all the... I love that movie. But what I'm saying is that it stretches the limits of your belief that they would do things like this. What he said, the oil and gas guy said, I wish it wasn't called the Monterey Shale. Now everybody knows it's fracking and it's called shale, and oh, it's a disaster already. It's a PR disaster already, you know. So they're not actually going and being forthcoming about this. I think you have to make sure that I don't know who would you go to find out if the Great Lakes were being leased. Would they have to be leased? They're public lands, sort of.
Because Canada is also invested in secret.
Right.
If you look at Keystone is being
Yeah.
managed, Canada is obviously for that project.
Well, what worked with Keystone, at least initially, if Bill McKibben and a number of us hadn't assembled 1,200 people to get arrested in front of the White House for 10 days or 2 weeks straight, I think Keystone would have happened and nobody would have ever heard about it. So it doesn't need to be Bill McKibben or myself to organize that kind of thing. What you do need to reach out to people who have play within the media. You can reach out to 350 to get their aid. You can reach out to all of those groups, but you do at some point in time, I believe, have to take a stand. The governor of Illinois, Governor Quinn, just signed a bill that greenlights fracking all throughout Illinois. In spite of the fact that there were 100 people in the state Senate chamber chanting shame, 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 shame in the chamber. And in spite of the fact that myself and Sandra Steingraber, who is from Illinois, went and testified, and they bulldozed right through there. And I can tell you right now that there is a civil disobedience movement that is mounting among the faith-based groups in Illinois to go ahead and take a stand and say, in President Obama, in your own home state, you got to pay attention to this because you're standing for this policy all over America. So I think it's about sustained action. I think it's about the basics of organizing. You know, simple organizing skills. I'm not a good organizer. I'm a filmmaker. I can't organize a sock drawer. But because it's just a disaster, you know, creative types. It's like there's scenes everywhere and there's a sock there. It's like a piece of music over here and there's a donut. It's like coffee stains on everything. You know, you can't see the edit room. But what I'm saying is that you have to organize. And maybe I'll throw to Doug to talk just for the last second. Did he leave? He's wandering off among the
He's not where he was.
exhibits. One thing that I want to encourage you to do is recognize that this is not about always putting it in the parameters of the environment. It's about putting it in the parameters of human rights and civil rights. You have a right to a healthy and clean environment. This society is still based on your rights. We, as you know, we are willing to trade our environment for a buck. We've been doing it for 250 years. We still feel very uncomfortable with trading our human rights for money. And there are rights-based organizations. One of them is called the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. Have you heard of them? CELDEF. They do a democracy workshop where they train you in the idea that democracy is based in our human rights. And I think when you put it in the parameters of human rights, we have a human right not to get toxically poisoned in this country. And appeal to the nature of that, our human and civil rights. I'd like to take that argument back to Governor Quinn, back to President Obama, back to our legislators who have forgotten that it's not, you know, of the corporations, by the oil and gas industry, for the oil and gas industry, but it's the people in each one of those. And I would encourage to base this conversation on human and civil rights at this moment. Okay,
So
are we out of time?
one last question,
Sure.
and then for those of you who are looking to go to the next workshop, it's about time. However, Josh is going to play the trailer for his new film, Gasland 2, so feel free to stick around for that. But before the last question, just one more round of applause for Josh Fox. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Listen, thank you so much for being here today, and fight hard. And know that if you're a renewable energy producer, if you have innovations, I want everyone's business card because we want to intersect with you looking forward for the Solutions Project.
I love your idea of not just what is it that people who are against the fossil fuel industry or who want to make a difference, what we're against, but what we're for, and also alternatives. And I guess it's kind of a comment, but also a question about how we keep in our minds not to just attack and vilify everybody who's involved, because there's an awful lot of people who don't have jobs, who are getting jobs, good paying jobs, through fracking and everything else, and it's a shame, but how to engage a lot of people and not attack them, because if you do, people just get entrenched.
You know, I totally agree with you. I'm making a piece, my next short piece is about workers, and it's in support of workers in the oil and gas industry. I am working with a family called the Bevins family in West Virginia. They lost their son on a drilling rig. He was killed in New York State. And I found out that you're 7 times more likely to die working for the oil and gas industry than you're working in any other industry in America. And I also discovered a whole community of really broken people who have been chemically poisoned, truck drivers who were told that they were hauling around mud when what they were hauling around was toxic and chemical waste. One of these guys, Randy Moyers, you'll see in this short film when you watch it, it's called CJ's Law, after CJ Bevins, who died, because they're trying to get a law passed protecting oil and gas workers. This guy, Randy Moyers, he was told he was hauling mud. In 4 months of hauling this mud and cleaning it off of his truck and stuff, he now has chemical sores that appear all over his body. He gets dizzy if he drives over 55 miles an hour. He can't play with his son for more than 3 hours. He gets exhausted. He can't remember anything. He's got serious neurological problems from dealing with this waste. And this is an epidemic among our oil and gas workers right now. Chronic health problems. Jose Lara, who was told to go inside condensate tanks and clean them out with no safety equipment, no mask. He was doing it in jean shorts. Died of 2 different forms of rare cancer. As he testified, he was saying, I didn't know this stuff was going to kill me. This is how the oil and gas industry treats workers. There are no unions. We also know that every $1 million you invest in oil and gas creates 3.7 jobs. Every $1 million you invest in wind and solar, respectively, creates 9.5 or 9.8 jobs. We know that. And they're not jobs that are destroying the community and destroying the value. This is not jobs, this is a fire sale. This is not economic development, this is exploitation. It's turning Pennsylvania into Nigeria, it's turning Colorado into Ecuador. This is not what we want in our America we want to protect. So when we're talking about workers, we're talking about people who got retrained by the fracking industry. Why can't we retrain them to do wind and solar? Why can't we retrain them to do the jobs that actually create value in the community and enrich their lives and are union jobs and are providing the future instead of destroying it? You know, it's like, you don't chop your furniture up to heat your house. You just don't do that. Or some people, you don't want to be in that position. So I don't think we have to disrespect workers. I know a lot of these guys, and they've been coming forward in droves to talk about what's happening to them. And I hope you take a look at that. But in the meantime, this new film called Gasland 2, it's going to be on HBO July 8th. Who has HBO? Few people. Who here has a friend who has HBO? Who here has ever been to a hotel where they have HBO? Okay. Everybody who has HBO, you're going to invite over 20 of your friends on July 8th. Because we want to change the game again. We want to change the conversation again. We want to do it again. The only way to do that is to get as many people watching that film. It's 7 for July, 8 the 8th at 9 p.m. It actually might be 8 p.m. Central, I don't know. But 7/8/8 or 7/8/9, you can remember that. It's the Monday after July 4th. So if you have HBO, you're going to invite over 20 of your friends. If you don't have HBO, you're going to take 20 of your friends and invite them over to your friend's house. Just show up, say we're having a party, we're watching Gasland 2. And if you don't have any friends or HBO, go to a hotel room and invite 20 people off the street and try not to get kicked out before the movie's over. Go to the website, we're going to give you a screening guide and a screening kit, and the kit will all be about all these things I'm talking about: community organizing, connecting with your local group, sending postcards to Barack Obama. Don't watch Gasland 2 alone. It's like Psycho, you know. Don't watch it alone. Watch it with your friends, watch it with the community. It's too scary to watch it alone, and you'll feel too disempowered. You have to watch it with a community that can get activated. I want to thank you so much for having me today. I love being here. I want to show you this trailer. This trailer's never been released. It's unreleased. It's not out yet. You get it first. I think it's cool. It's only 45 seconds long. All right, hold on. Website is gaslandthemovie.com. Oh, and our handle on Twitter is @GaslandMovie. Can we do one thing quickly? Can I take a picture of this whole crowd and tweet it out to Barack Obama and say, we're from Gasland, we're from Wisconsin, we're not from Gasland. Can I do it? Wait, I'm gonna get my phone. Hold on.
Don't play the trailer yet. Don't play the trailer yet. Don't play it yet. Don't anybody move. Come back. Okay.
Here's how we're going to do this. Everybody going to stand up? Okay. Move a little bit closer into the center if you can. Center out a little bit. Stand up. This is a big, because it's going to be hard to take this picture. Doug Shields is going to help me with it. Doug, you take it also. Okay, put up a hand. Put up a hand. Peace sign. Throw up a fist. No lewd gestures. Okay, and we're going to take this picture and we're going to send this out to Barack Obama. And we're going to say, we're from Wisconsin and we're not from Gasland and my phone has died. No, it's there. It's working. Hold on just 1 second. Normally I don't take the picture, but we're going to do it. Hold on. Oh, that's fantastic. Ready? 1, 2. That's awesome.
awesome. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna send that to Twitter with our handle @GaslandMovie. Retweet it and put "Not from Gasland." When you see it, our handle @GaslandMovie. Just put hashtag "Not from Gasland." Twitters don't change the world, but they do raise awareness, and you can pass that on. Thanks so much. All right, do we have the trailer ready to go? Sort of, a little bit slanty. That's okay. Okay. Thank you again.
My name is Josh Fox. It's been 5 years since the first proposal to drill thousands of gas wells came knocking at my door. And with thousands of cases of water contamination, air pollution, and health problems across the U.S., it's not just the numbers that get you dizzy.
This is where we eat, sleep, live. This is our home.
There was only one problem. The gas industry denied everything.
We have found no instance of hydraulic fracturing harming groundwater.
The war for who was going to tell this story was on.
They want a street fight out of this.
Never underestimate the power of money.
It's scary when your own government is afraid of a business.
People complain about the price of gas. Wait till you're paying twice that for water.
Okay, see you next time.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Josh Fox.